Even geniuses tend to be cognitively specialized. What is unique about genius polymaths? It's interesting you should ask that, because I had this old theory of what I call deep creativity, which I tried to get published many years ago in a journal that rejected it because I used insufficiently flowery prose. This journal was one of these silly pseudo-creative journals that were trying to make people use more humanities prose to discuss scientific terms, so I never tried to get it published anywhere else. But the theory is, this is the very basic level of knowledge. When you dig down deep enough into any given area of knowledge, you start noticing those elements, or those components of the sets of that knowledge which overlap with other sets of knowledge. So when you really dig down, when you're so specialized that you've gotten down into the weeds of whatever it is you're doing, it's not too difficult to notice the transitivity between those very deep, what I call consilience dynamics, of those factors that are non-exclusive to the set you are studying, those elements that are shared with other sets. And once you've noticed those consilience dynamics, it's not too difficult then to branch out in a polymathic way and start picking up on what people refer to as the unity of knowledge, those factors that engender the unity of knowledge. So you get these mathematicians, for example, who got really interested in some obscure bit of mathematics, like say topology theory or something like that. And they got really interested in what you could do with higher dimensions. All of a sudden they realized that the solutions they were generating for these not Y-convoluted topologies were frameworks within you could unify quantum mechanics and relativity through string theory. And what they had actually done was they created these structures like Wucabat structures. They have all these funny names which originally started off purely as mathematical abstractions, which certain physicists, very smart physicists, looked at and went, well, hang on, we'll have those, we'll take those, we'll use those as the basis for building spacetimes which accommodate dimensions which have been compactified to very small sort of Planck scales. And that's an example of where you can dig so far down into something if you start seeing this unity of knowledge. Another example would be Darwin in his 1871 book, The Descent of Man, and you look at how he branches out into humans, starts talking about human sociology. He uses the word evolutionary psychology. I believe his was the first instance of this term. He starts talking about adaptationism applied to understanding human behaviour. All the basic elements of that deal. A century before E.O. Wilson, a century before Bob Travers, starting to notice this fundamental unity of knowledge in both our cases. We started off in other subjects, and we've moved into intelligence and HBD and then this kind of area. And as you said, part of the reason for that is that as you go really deeply into a particular subject, then you start to see the connections. And once you see these connections, the consilience, the unity of knowledge, once you see them, you can't unsee them. That's the problem. There's a certain pressure on you in academia to just stay within your subject area. I remember my supervisor saying, well, don't look into this as outside your area. Don't look into this. Leave it alone. But the problem is that you can't unsee it, and it becomes fascinating that this framework which never occurred to you as doing anything other than dealing with your field suddenly is relevant to intelligence, or relevant to the rise and fall of civilizations, or relevant to everything, because that's the nature, of course, of consilience under E.O. Wilson's whole model with the unity of knowledge. And that's why it's so fascinating when you get these people that say on comment sections, you have a degree in the doctorate in blank, that just shows that they have a very sufficient understanding of whatever their subject matter is, because only someone that has a superficial understanding could possibly think that you won't go outside the area that you're trained in. Because if you borrow down, then eventually you get to Australia. Well, it's the issues that there's a form of it which is called pernicious anti-intellectualism, which I call, for want of an actual term, naïve credentialism. So just playing devil's advocate for a moment, there is a certain face validity to the claim that one actually needs to have the relevant qualifications in order to opine on a given area of research. Fair enough, I'm not going to deny that, but by and large people with degrees in biology are going to be better positioned to opine on biology matters than they are on, say, issues related to astrophysics, or issues related to mathematics, or something far removed from their area of expertise. So generally it does hold true enough most of the time that you can get away with making a claim that somebody who lacks a particular area of expertise in a particular area, as evidenced by a particular qualification, probably should not be relied upon as having high source credibility in terms of having a meaningful opinion on this different area. However, this ignores the reality of what you could call manifest expertise. That is to say, people who have manifest expertise in an area which may have manifested independent of a particular mode of accreditation, like a specific degree. And any rational individual has to take that into consideration when making a judgment about whether this individual is able to talk about this issue with any authority. And there are plenty of examples of people who clearly have qualifications in one area and who have moved into another and who have clearly made significant accomplishments in that area. I mean, how can Jim Flynn pontificate on the Flynn effect when he did a political science degree? To give a little background on Jim Flynn for those of you that don't know about him and his particular history, in the 1960s, he was a radically oriented political science political scientist rather. He was very much a 60s type radical. And he was particularly interested in Arthur Jensen's work, which at the time was very topical because of the Harvard Educational Review paper. And he was looking to disprove it, and his way of trying to disprove it was to prove that IQ was not stable across time. He wanted to show that if it could vary across time, it had no cross-situational validity, therefore it couldn't be used to say much about anything about race differences, individual differences, or anything for that matter. So he started digging around in the archives and he noted a pattern. He noted that over times of each iterative renome of a given IQ test, the level of IQ increased by about 2 to 3 IQ points. Now, instead of going to Jensen and is wrong, Jensen BTFO. Instead of doing that, what he chose to do instead was he developed manifest expertise in intelligence research. He actually started researching the field more broadly, and he started to realize that what he found might actually be a significant contribution to the field of intelligence research. And it was in the way he positioned his findings. If you read his early papers, his papers from the 80s, his 2 papers in the Psychological Bulletin, one on global IQ gains, one on IQ gains in the States. He doesn't say this completely invalidates the concept of IQ. He says this suggests something new and hitherto unforeseen is going on with IQ. Something is causing it to lose cross-temporal stability, and this is extremely interesting. This has relevance to the issue of the permanence of race attainment gaps. This is a position he changed his mind and gradually over the years. But he developed this manifest expertise, and now he is considered quite rightly a globally renowned expert on IQ testing, someone who's made a very significant contribution to that field.